Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes him pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's fact. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best. I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
Welcome back to this week's episode of the Last Round Podcast after a big weekend in Cinco de Mayo for the expected Canelo fight in May, and obviously another one in September that he's been doing for years and years, mostly in Vegas for several years now. And one person who was involved in the main event, probably as close as you can get, if you don't include the trainers and the actual fighters, this gentleman was as close as you can get to that main event. He's been on multiple times here on the Last Round Podcast. He's known as the crime-fighting Cutman. He's a homicide detective for the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department and a professional cutman in the sport of boxing. And we're pretty sure you've seen him in the corner of some of your favorite fighters and some of the biggest fighters in the world today. He's probably the most, at least to us, the most prominent cutman in the business today. Mike Rodriguez returns to the Last Round. Thank you for joining us, Mike.
What's up, fellas? I'm glad to be back on with you guys.
Thanks, man. Thank you for joining us, especially after a big weekend in Las Vegas, Nevada. So let's just jump into it. This past Saturday, the 4th of May, from the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada, on DAZN and Amazon pay-per-view, a joint venture between those two broadcasters. Saul Canelo Alvarez gets the unanimous decision win over 12 rounds over Jaime Munguia, who takes the first loss of his professional career. He is now 43-1. Alvarez retains his undisputed super middleweight championships of the world by scores of 117-110, 116-111, and 115-112. So, Mike, when you first heard, because you've been training with Freddie Roach and his team for a little bit now, and obviously Jaime Munguia, I believe this was his second fight under Freddie Roach's tutelage. When you found out, whether it was from Freddie or from somebody else on your team there, that you guys got the Canelo fight for Jaime, what was your initial reaction?
You know, obviously, whether you're a fighter, a manager, a trainer, a cut man, or even a fan, you want to see and you want to be involved in the biggest fights. I was super excited. It was a quick turnaround, because on January 27th, we were in Phoenix with Munguia fighting John Ryder, and that was our first time that he had been in camp with us. It was a successful fight. And then I learned a couple of weeks later that Jaime was just back in the gym in general. And, and like everything else, you're hearing a lot of names swirl around for Canelo because, he's the mega superstar and he can dictate a lot of things. And then low key, you started hearing that Jaime was, in the running for it. I don't like to jinx things. That's not my role on the team. I'm never going to be the one to put out information, especially false information. But when we finally got that confirmation, super excited. As a former fighter and a boxing fan, and for what I do now, there's nothing better than working on the big stage with mega superstar fighters and mega superstar fights in Las Vegas, the fight capital of the world, and the atmosphere was electric. And I'm just blessed to be able to do that at a high level and do the things that I love to do.
In the first fight with Jaime Munguia that you were a part of with Freddie Roach, what was your initial impression of somebody like Jaime, working with him for the first time?
Well, first of all, it was work with him that first night in the fight, but I'm in camp with him because he's training over here in Hollywood at the Wild Card. He had requested that I be in the gym with him during sparring days. And it's really good because you get to know your fighter, their breathing patterns, the little small nuances that you don't want to learn the first time that you're working with them. Everybody's different. Some guys like their mouthpiece in between rounds. Some guys like it out. Some guys like the water a certain way, and then in I think the 4th or 5th round against Ryder, he got cut. So, I got put to work rather early. And my only concern during this last camp was there's a quick turnaround. He had fought January 27th and he's back, in the gym, probably mid-March, already sparring. That doesn't leave a lot of time for any wound to heal. So, not to say I was on pins and needles, but it was something that on the sparring days I was there making sure, taking care of his face, and it held up. It held up, and his preparation was fantastic. He's a high character guy. As you can see, he came to fight. He wasn't just there to survive. He was trying to win every minute of that fight. And you know what? The bond that I've been able to create with Jaime, as well as his bond with Freddie and the trainers, Marvin Zamudio, Dickie Eklund, Pepe Riley Jr., the strength and conditioning coach, Pedro Garcia, and just the whole wild card team. It's a really good atmosphere. And even in defeat, I didn't feel like we lost. I feel like we won a lot of things.
Mike, with Jaime's primary first language being Spanish, and obviously Freddie Roach speaking English, even though Freddie Roach has been involved in the sport of boxing for many, many years and has trained other fighters who, there's language barriers there and stuff like that. But you being right there and, being around Freddie for so many fighters now, a couple of years now, how did you observe, maybe any type of language barriers between Jaime and Freddie there?
No, there's no barrier. Jaime speaks a lot better English than people think he does. He may not be comfortable to get on the camera in front of millions of people and speak English, but he made it a point these last couple of camps. A lot of times in the gym, he's speaking English. My first language, believe it or not, my primary language growing up was not Spanish. So my Spanish, Jaime speaks better English than it is my Spanish. But we had Pepe Riley in the gym. Pepe speaks, former 1992 Olympian. Pepe Riley was on the Olympic team with Oscar. Pep is a huge help and a huge resource, but there was no limitations as far as what Jaime can understand that we're saying, or anything that he's saying. When you're around people and you get used to the tone and the tenor and the verbiage and how they talk, there's boxing talk as well. Whether a guy's from Mexico, a guy's from Kazakhstan, or you got a guy from China, everybody knows what a jab is. Everybody knows how to move their head. So there was no limitations on that. And, if you met Jaime and he knew all you spoke was English, he would pretty much be able to have a conversation with you.
Mike, you also were in the corner of Dimitri Bivol, the 175-pound WBA light heavyweight world champion, who is one of the only individuals, limited individuals, who has given Canelo Alvarez a loss in his career. When you were in camp with Jaime and Freddie and all that, did they pick your brain a little bit at all because you were in Bivol's corner for that loss?
No, it's a completely different animal, two completely different styles. On certain teams, I have a role where maybe they'll ask my opinion, but you got Freddie Roach. He's got his team of assistant trainers. I'm a guy that believes in playing his position. If somebody was to ask, then I would definitely tell him. But he was in good hands, and I knew I was going to have my hands full because of the cut from January. And I was doing everything I can to keep his face nice and fresh. As you can see in the fight, he had a bloody nose in both nostrils. He had some swelling on both sides of his head. And the cut didn't open, but I could start to see it get a little irritated. So I had my hands full probably from the second round on to make sure the swelling wasn't an issue. The bleeding stopped in his nose after a couple of rounds. And that's really what I was focused on. But they have completely different styles. Freddie Roach has had 47 world champions. And he knows his fighters. He's there with them every day. Marvin Zamudio was in the corner with him, also helping out, giving instructions. They developed that bond in the gym, because you got to remember, when we're in that 12-round fight, we've already been in the camp for 200 rounds of sparring. So, a lot of it's just a few little simple reminders, but Jaime was doing everything he could to win that fight. He was listening. As you can see, his jab has improved, his defense has improved, and people got to remember who he was in there with.
You mentioned his jab, and at least for the first half of the fight, especially those first 4 or 5 rounds, it was pretty strong. Those were probably some of Jaime's best rounds of the entire fight. How did you, being in that corner, especially in those first 4 rounds, how did you react? And how was Freddie's advice to Jaime during those first 4 or 5 rounds?
I think Jaime was following the game plan. He was doing everything that he could. Against a lesser fighter, maybe the game plan works for 10, 11, 12 rounds. But, Saul Canelo Alvarez is an all-time great fighter. He's a very smart fighter. He takes in information. He bides his time. He picks his spots. His combinations, when he lands them, are very telling to the judges. They're very sharp combinations. You can try to do everything you can to implement your game plan, but you have to remember there's another guy over there, trying to contradict that. And, like anything else, he had rounds that Jaime did very well. And there were rounds where, Canelo got the best of him, even dropped him. But as you can see, Jaime finished that fight strong. I mean, he got his second win as far as I could see in about the 9th round, which I believe he won unanimously that round. And, he was trying the whole time. And he pushed Alvarez. Alvarez looked like he was in a fight. And I think Canelo even said, I mean, he had much respect for Jaime before the fight. And I think he even has more respect for him now after the fight.
Out of all those 12 rounds of the whole 12 rounds of that fight, Mike, what's the most memorable statement or line that Freddie Roach told Jaime that sticks out of your mind from Saturday night?
You know what's crazy is because Jaime had the 2 bloody noses, he had the little bit of swelling on each side. A lot of the times, to be honest, I try to be an all-star at my position, and I'm really focused on what I'm doing. And you have to remember, it's super loud in there.
Yeah.
It is super loud in there. And I really couldn't tell you, to be honest. There's probably people watching that could tell you more than that, because when I see a fighter and I see certain traumas on their bodies, and Jaime with the 2 bloody noses and each nostril a little bit bloody, which I stopped, and making sure that those swelling on each side of his face didn't become a problem, and keeping a close eye and attention to the cut that he had suffered in January, which never became an issue. So that was really my focus. And like I said, it was so loud in there that, even if we were screaming, it would have been hard for me to hear.
Speaking of loud, I wanted to get your quick take on this, on the rendition of the American national anthem by the mariachi, the 3 gentlemen. What did you think of that? It's been getting a lot of attention.
We didn't hear that.
Oh, you guys didn't hear it?
No, we were in the dressing room, and we were in the hallway of the dressing room, so we could hear some kind of noise. We could hear crowd cheering, but we didn't really know. We just knew that after the anthems, we were going to walk, and I really independently can't recall even hearing them from where we were.
Mike, what did Jaime say afterwards? Did he think, Canelo's better than I expected, or like a couple more fights and, maybe I would have had him?
You know what? Those conversations, obviously he talked to the media and he talked to the commentators after the fight, with whoever he talked to. I believe it was Jim Gray. He's obviously disappointed because he was undefeated. Like I said, he wasn't just happy to be there. He came to win. He honestly thought he was going to win. We came up short. In the back, he was subdued because he lost, and he's a competitor. He was around his family and the team, and many people came in to express many well wishes. And he's a professional. He got dressed and he went out to the to face the reporters and everything. But I think as a competitor, and because he wasn't just happy to be there, he was disappointed. And then upon reflection, you're going to realize, hey, we might have lost. We got some things to work on, but Jesus Christ, he's got a lot to work with. And I think he proved under those are the brightest lights right there. When you fight Canelo Alvarez, you are under the brightest lights. The fighters, the referee, the judges, the trainer, the cutman, the promotion, those are the brightest lights. And sometimes you can get caught up in that, but he's a competitor, and I think he'll come back bigger. I mean, he'll come back better, and he'll come back stronger. That was his only fight, was Freddie Roach, and you can already see the improvement. I see the improvement, in the gym, and he's could be in some very big fights where he's going to be the marketable A-side.
Away from the fighters, Mike, how is it for you on a big fight like that? I'm sure it's like, for us, when we do something, you check your equipment 3, 4, 5 times. You don't want to walk out and think, I've forgotten a cotton bud or something like that.
Yeah, it's, thank God I consider myself an experienced guy. I've worked some big fights. I've worked with Manny Pacquiao. I've worked with Katie Taylor, who is a huge, huge international superstar. I've worked with her in Ireland. I've worked with Denis Lebedev in Russia, who may not be a household name in the United States, but former cruiserweight champ, was a pretty big deal over in Russia. I've worked with Bivol against Canelo. I've worked with Chavez Jr. against Canelo. I've worked with Errol Spence, Sean Porter, J-Rock, Julian Williams. So I've had some pretty I've been in some pretty big fights, and I pride myself that in the bigger the moment, I'm going to perform my best. As a former athlete and a former fighter, I'm glad that things slow down for me rather than speed up because I've been there before. But you said something key. It's all about preparation. I must check my stuff 50 times during fight day. And then when I make sure I take it to the arena, I make sure I have it with me. And I probably have more stuff than I need, but I have an old saying, and in the cop life, it's better to have and not need than to need and not have.
I've interviewed Stitch before, and I asked him, his ritual for, fight week and stuff like that. And I know you're good friends with Stitch, and we're going to get onto him soon, your relationship. But do you also iron all of your stuff beforehand, like Stitch? And
no, Stitch is old school. He still goes to the iron. I like to be comfortable. I usually wear a shirt, a similar form-fitted shirt. Sometimes they'll give me a corner jacket. I'm not a big fan of corner jackets because I like to have as little bit on me as possible. But I think everybody has their own individual nuances. I know when my son, he worked the Stanionis fight against Gabriel Maestre. Even though he's worked around me a lot, he's got his own ways of doing things. He was the primary cut man. I wasn't even up on the apron. I was just down on the floor doing the water and stool. He folds his gauze pads a certain way, and he prepares his swabs a certain way, the length that he likes them. So everybody's got their own little things that work for them. But it's just about being ready, because you hope for the best, but you have to be prepared and you have to expect the worst. And that's what a good cut man does. And I think Stitch, he took the cut man. When you think of an old cut man like from the Rocky movies and the guys that worked it years ago, he took cut men out of the Stone Ages. He really transcended the craft from MMA to boxing, and being hygienic in the corner and being prepared. And then you have guys like Carlos Vargas, who was a retired firefighter. I mean, these guys really took things, to a whole nother level. And then you have some of my other contemporaries. And, we try to do the best job we can under sometimes very, very difficult circumstances. And you guys know, like anything else, when you mess up or people think you mess up, you got the blame game because everybody thinks they can do your job better.
Any superstitions, Mike?
I sometimes have dreams that I'm out there and I don't have anything. Like I've walked out there with nothing. So I don't necessarily say superstitions, but I keep my stuff situated around me in a certain way. But I think that's just muscle memory. And anybody that's been in the military or been in a cop or have firefighters that have to do things that they perform, they like to know where all their stuff is, because sometimes you don't have time to think. You only have time to react.
Mike, you've described in our past interviews with you about when you're in the corner and you see a certain punch or a certain exchange with your fighter with the opponent, and you're just like, oh man, I think that's going to cause something. I gotta get ready when he comes back from the corner. Did that happen at all? Did that cross your mind during this fight with Munguia and Canelo?
Yeah, only because he had sustained that cut in the Ryder fight, and it was a very point of concern for me. And I had talked to Jaime before the fight several times. I said, hey, because there was a short gap in between fights, and scars just don't, they just don't magically heal in a couple of months. Any of us know that have any scars on our elbows or knees or cut our head, that skin can be very sensitive. And especially it was on the forehead. So, what's getting impacted the most, when you're getting hit or you're blocking blows or somebody's, I think there was even one time in the fight they even accidentally headbutted each other, which is going to happen. So it was something I even told Jaime, look, there's a chance it may open up. I said, but don't worry about it. I got you. I'm ready. I'm prepared. I have everything that I need, as a recipe for success to make sure that when you stand up, in between rounds for that next round, you're going to be ready to go.
How much, in terms of gauze and, any of the necessary tools that you need as a cut man, do you not over prepare, but do you have like an overabundance of equipment? Because like, what if somebody has a really, really bad cut and it just keeps bleeding and bleeding?
Absolutely. I have enough stuff there for 5 fights. You just never know. What if my bottle of adrenaline, I accidentally drop it, it falls and breaks? I got to make sure I got other ones. And, some people aren't in the position financially because they're not working that level of fight. This stuff's expensive. I mean, there's 3 things you can use, man. You can use, adrenaline 1 in 1,000. You can use thrombin, and you can use Avitine. People don't realize Avitine, for a little sponge, like a square gauze pad, costs between $900 and $1,200. Well, that doesn't really make much sense if you're working a fight and you're making $100. The bottles of adrenaline have gone up from $30 to like $250 to $300. Thrombin is like $300-400 for a little bottle that's 1/3 the size of a bottle of adrenaline. But when you're working on a big stage, I always tell myself, I can't be cheap. My reputation means more to me, so I don't really care how much it costs. And I will do everything I can in my powers that I'm going to give my fighter the best chance for success based on the work that I do.
So there's been some talk, at least online, from the boxing community the last couple of days about there was a combination that Canelo landed in the 12th round against Munguia when it looked like Canelo, kind of rocked him a little bit, but then kind of stopped and kind of clinched. People, speculating, if you want to call them conspiracy theorists or not, are kind of speculating that Canelo kind of did that on purpose to kind of have him finish the fight. What do you think?
I couldn't get into Canelo's mind. I mean, a million things are going on there. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he was anticipating the bell. I don't know. What's crazy, guys, is when you're a Cutman, you're watching the fight from a way different perspective. Way different. I haven't watched the fight. I haven't, other than little highlights. And then I saw something about that, like, oh, he let him off the hook. These guys are professionals, man. If you don't think Canelo Alvarez wanted a knockout, but guess what? Jaime made sure that he wasn't going to get knocked out. But that's what the internet does, man. You have a lot of people that are always speculating and they're making conspiracy theories. And I try not to get caught up in that stuff. I work in the business. There's a lot of things I could say to certain people, but then if I did, they would be offended and they probably wouldn't like me very much. So I try to keep my professional opinions around other professionals that work and people that I respect. And if you get caught up in that internet banner about who said this and he said that, I mean, you could go on all day. You could go on all day. The way people, here's my pound for pound list and your pound for pound list sucks. And it's just, it goes on. And that's why I'm probably because of the job, what I do for a living, I'm very fact oriented. And I try to look at things in their totality as opposed to making a rush judgment or some kind of confirmation bias where my opinion is already made up regardless of what the facts are. It's that old saying, like, I wouldn't have seen it if I didn't believe it.
What do you think, as a fan, what would you want to see Canelo go next?
I mean, I think the Benavidez fight. I like David Benavidez. I've known David since he was a teenager. I'm a huge fan of him. You know why? I'm a fan of dudes that will fight anybody. I had a good conversation before the fight on the way to the arena and one day's proceeding with Omar and Brandon Figueroa. Both brothers have been world champions. I've been fortunate enough. I have worked with both guys, and I've known them for a while. And we were just laughing because I'm like, when people look at you guys, they won't think much. They're not bodybuilders. You know what I mean? They don't have the super physique. But tell you what, they both really could fight. And I remember Omar during the time when Golden Boy broke away from PBC. When PBC started, Omar was a huge star, and he fought in a lot of really good fights. And I had the good fortune to work with him a couple of those fights, along with Brandon when he knocked out Luis Nary. And I've also worked against Omar, but I'm really good friends with him. I had a chance to chop it up with him. I just like fighters that want to fight anybody. David Benavidez is that guy. I would love to see him and Canelo fight. I sometimes, because I work in the business, I don't get excited about a lot of fights just because I kind of know maybe they waited some guy out, or maybe he didn't get he had a short camp. So I already kind of know, I think I know who's going to win. But David Benavidez against Canelo, that would be insane. It was insane the other night. Mexican on Mexican. Guadalajara against TJ, against Tijuana. Oh, my God. That arena, Jaime Munguia had a lot of fans there. It was electric. It was electric. I was standing on the apron like, man, this is everything you dream about.
Did you have any conversation with Freddie Roach after the fight, before you guys parted ways? Like, hey, or is it just pretty professional? Like, hey, good job. We'll see you next time.
No, because, Freddie and the team, we all get together and eat. We ate after the fight. We ate before the fight. So, we talk. There's a lot of emotions, and it's kind of like, I'm not going to say a letdown just because you've been in camp and everybody's, by the time we get out of there with the press conference and we head back to the hotel to get something to eat, it was 11:15. Everybody's kind of like, not to say mentally burned out, but man, we put our heart and soul into this. And me and Freddie did have a quick conversation. I said, wow, what a performance and what a great job by everybody. And that was echoed by the assistant trainers, Marvin Zamudio, Pepper Riley, Dickie Eklund Jr. I mean, the strength and conditioning coach, Pedro. I mean, we were all there together, and we all had our part in it. I know I was proud, and I think they were too. And I think there's a lot of big things, and sky's the limit for Jaime.
Now, I know it's hard to kind of predict and anything like that, but sometimes when fighters take losses, the trainers and their team are always like the first to be blamed.
Right.
I'm sure it's not something that you guys talked about or anything like that, but is that something that maybe Jaime would be considering?
Why would he? He fought the best fight of his life. Even in defeat, he fought the best fight that he had ever fought against an elite all-time first ballot Hall of Famer. And it's not like he didn't hit Canelo. I saw the punch stats. He landed 170 punches and I think almost 100 power shots. He was in the fight. He was always a threat. He wasn't just there to survive. He didn't get knocked out. I mean, there's just a lot to build on. I honestly think the vibe from everybody was like, wow, we're going to do more together. And I think that's the big thing with Jaime's team, with his dad around, the guys that are around him, the people that support him on the administrative end, with all his other stuff. Our training thing at Wild Card, it's like a machine. Everybody, like I told you earlier, and it's true. We all try to be an all-star at our position. Freddie did a wonderful job. You can already see the improvements. There's no such thing as a perfect fighter. It's not like we went in there, and lost to somebody that we were supposed to, to beat. It's Canelo Alvarez. And I think there's always going to be that kind of nitpicking. But I mean, why would Jaime leave Freddie Roach? I mean, I think they're just going to continue to bond and they're just going to continue to get better. And I think in a month or two, I mean, hopefully we get a call and we're back in camp with another huge fight coming up later in the summer.
What do you think about the comparison, how people say that it's like when Canelo fought Mayweather and Canelo lost, but he learned from it and he became the biggest star that he is? You think it was the same thing like with Jaime losing to Canelo, same thing?
It could potentially be, because you even heard Jaime, I believe in his post-fight comments, I forget whether it was in the ring or the post-fight press conference, he said Canelo has a lot of experience, just like Mayweather had a lot of experience. You're dealing with Floyd Mayweather's and Manny Pacquiao's and Canelo Alvarez's. I mean, these guys are all-time great fighters. I mean, Canelo's the first ever Mexican super middleweight champion. I mean, I think he's a 5-division world champion, 4 or 5 division world champion. I mean, there's not a lot of shame in that. And that's the great thing, is that Jaime gave it his best effort. He was in there from the first bell to the last bell trying to win that fight.
And then in the co-main event, Mario Barrios gets the 12-round unanimous decision win over Fabian Maidana for the WBC interim welterweight title. And then one of your old fighters, Brandon Figueroa, gets the 9th-round KO over Jesse Magdaleno for the WBC interim featherweight title. Did you get a chance to talk to Figueroa? I know you were busy with Jaime and stuff like that, but did you cross paths with him to congratulate him?
No, I did not. I spent a little bit of time with them before the fight. We went over to the arena together. Our locker rooms were next door. I did talk to Jesse afterwards because I've actually worked with Jesse and I've worked with Brandon. I worked with Gilbert Maestre before. who fought my guy Stanionis. You know, so it was kind of nice. And then when you look at the free portion of the Prime broadcast, I worked with Vito Melanicki several fights. I've worked with Jesus Ramos like 7 or 8 fights. So I mean, I thought about this. I'm like, wow, I've worked with a lot of these guys. You know, I've been a part of their teams, and you know, it's a really good feeling. And then to see my son on the big stage, you know, and he had his 3rd world champion, and you know, he's worked a lot of big fights as well. And him and Marvin Zamudio, you know, did a fantastic job with Imantas Stanionis. You know, and that was a big win for Wild Card as well. So I mean, it was a good night. It was a great event. It was great for boxing. And most of all, I'm very happy and very proud of Jaime Munguia because he showed what he's very capable of. And I just think that, I know I've said it 4 times, man. I mean, the sky's the limit for that kid. He's such a good kid. He's such a hard worker. And he deserves everything that he's going to get here in the next few years.
We mentioned Stanionis and how your son was the lead cutman in there. You were kind of in the shadows with the water and stuff like that, but he was leading the charge there. You know, we've talked about this the last couple of times you've been on, how you've been getting your son in the family business with this and, you know, teaching him the ropes, and he's been kind of doing it on his own now and stuff like that. As of this Saturday, what is something additional that you've seen and observed that he's learning now?
You know, he's been doing this now about 11 years, so he's not new to it.
Okay. I thought he was a little bit newer than that.
No, he's 35 years old. I mean, he's a grown-ass man.
Yeah.
He's, you know, I got 50 fighters worldwide, and all the trainers, if I can't make it, if I'm double booked, he's worked with Freddie. He's worked with Buddy McGirt. He's worked with Ronnie Shields. Like I said, he's worked with Marvin Zamodios. You know, he's worked with a lot of top trainers. He worked a couple of fights ago, not the last fight, but he worked with Yokasta Valle, you know, when she defended her title. Not that catastrophe that happened in the last fight, you know. So he worked cuts for Sergey Lipinets, you know, so he's battle tested. You know, he was a good athlete. He's very calm. The thing that I love about him is that when things get very chaotic in the corner, he's very calm and he does his job. You know, when he always comes through with fine cutters, and the moment doesn't get too big for him because he has worked some big fights. But some people, he's not a guy that's really going to like put himself out there. He's not on social media. You know, he's not out there with a swab in his mouth saying, hey, I'm the cut man. He's a really low profile guy. And as long as he gets the respect and the appreciation from his fighters and the trainers, that's all he really cares about. So I'm very proud of Anthony. Have
you guys ever faced off against each other?
Absolutely. I'm going to tell you 2 stories, and they kind of make sense. I was working with Nathaniel Gall. Actually, he was working with Nate Gallimore, and Nate Gallimore was going to fight J-Rock Julian Williams. Well, Julian's all the way in Philly, and Nate's out of which at the time I was training a lot at Pullman's gym up in Northridge. And guess what? Who has to fight? Nate Gallimore and Julian Williams. And guess what? They don't like each other. They couldn't stand each other. Okay. And we went against each other on Showtime, and Julian got the decision. And there was still some bad blood, but like, you know, we're family, you know. So then fast forward a couple of years, 2 of my fighters are going to fight, Imantas Stanionis and Virgil Ortiz. You know, what do? You know, you got to pick between one daughter, and you got to pick between another daughter or son. And I even went to Virgil's dad, and I said, look, Virgil, I've been working with Stanionis longer. I got to give him the first right of refusal. There's a possibility that I'm not going to work with you this fight. I have to give Imantas that respect. Well, for whatever reason, I could not come to terms with his management at the time. I made a decision that I wasn't going to work with him, but I said, if money is the issue, then if you were smart, you would hire my son because he already works with Marvin, trainer. Turns out they did. I was going to go with Virgil. It was going to be the first time that I know of that a father and son were going to face off in a world title fight. And as you know, Virgil wasn't able to fight because of an illness, and the fight got scrapped. And as you know, from last 2 weeks ago, I worked with Virgil. So I think in the end, some things got a way of always working themselves out.
And then also, at least in the U.S., we're in California, this morning, the 6th of May, from the Tokyo Dome in Japan, Tokyo, Japan, on ESPN, the monster Naoya Inoue gets the TKO in the 6th round against Luis Nary. Inoue retains the undisputed super bantamweight titles of the world. I know a lot of people over here probably didn't see it unless you're a really, really hardcore boxing fan, because it was very, very early hours in the morning here in California. But I'm sure you've heard of the win. Nary did get a knockdown against Inoue in the very first round, I believe, with the left hook, which was a pretty sweet punch. What'd you think about? You probably haven't watched it, but what do you think about the news that Inoue got the win, and then you probably heard that Nary got a knockdown? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I saw the highlights. So I work with Luis Nary. I've been in the gym with Luis Nary. And I worked against him when he got stopped by Brandon Figueroa. Let me tell you one thing. The first 1 or 2 rounds, Luis Nary is as dangerous and is as strong as puncher as anybody, okay? But a great world champion like the Monster, in a way, he's going to figure things out. And when that guy hits you, he can hit you in the arms, he can hit you in the shoulders, he hurts you. The one thing that he really does is he hits you on the button with his best shots. And that double right hand that he threw, oh my God, that was a thing of beauty. And Luis Nary is no walk in the park. I've seen him spar in the gym. I've seen him fight. I've worked with him. I've worked against him. He is a very strong puncher and a very dangerous guy for a couple of rounds. But the fight went about what I expected.
What do you think is the Monster's ceiling? Because he keeps cleaning out all these divisions. I mean, what's his ceiling?
Well, I think you're seeing his ceiling. I mean, sometimes we just have to appreciate greatness. It's like with him and Crawford. Sometimes people, they expect like the fighter, like, oh, you need to move up a division. Marvin Hagler stayed at 160 pounds his whole career, And I just think now with a lot of internet banner, I mean, just appreciate the guy for what he is. He's a 3 or 4 division world champion, and 126, maybe 130 might be his ceiling. Guys start to get a little bigger. Things, it doesn't mean he's not a great fighter. Just let him be a great fighter. Alexis Arguello, one of my all-time great fighters, he was a featherweight, junior lightweight, champion. And then I believe he went up to 140 pounds and he ran into Aaron Pryor, who was at his natural weight. Duran to me is the greatest lightweight that ever lived. If you remember, he had even after getting knocked out by Tommy Hearn, brutally knocked out, he still went up to 160 and gave Marvin Hagler hell. He beat Iran Barkley. I mean, there was just so many memories that I have of a guy like Roberto Duran. And here's the problem now. A guy loses one fight, and all of a sudden he's trash, he's this, he's overrated. I mean, come on, look at the records of the greatest fighters ever. Look at their records. They lost, they came back. Oscar De La Hoya, he's a great fighter. He lost twice to Mosley. He lost to Bernard Hopkins. He lost to Trinidad. He never turned down any smoke from anybody. They're fighters. That's what a great fighter does. Today, man, they have made guys so hesitant, I think, to want to lose a fight. No, dare to be great. I'm not a UFC fan, guys. I've rarely watched it other than back in the day when they had like Rampage and Tito Ortiz and Chuck Liddell. And I kind of took a break. And a few weeks ago, I watched that great card that they had. And let me tell you something. For a guy that didn't like UFC or mixed martial arts all that much, man, I was glued to my TV for about 7 straight fights. And now I have a renewed respect and interest that these people come to fight. And if they lose a fight or two, and if a guy's got a record of 11-4, but he's fought some killers, that gives him respect. So, it's just, they're fighters, and I love fighters that want to fight, a la David Benavidez, a la guys like Roberto Duran, Sugar Ray Leonard. I'm not saying Benavidez is in their class, but what I'm saying is I think he'll pretty much fight anyway. He's going 175 pounds.
Going back to the Monster Inoue, Mike, in addition to Canelo, Crawford, these fighters of this last decade being considered generational talents, is Inoue in that category as well?
Absolutely. I mean, he sold out the Tokyo Dome, 55,000 people. And then you got those other people. Oh, can he do it over the United States? Well, I don't think Benavidez or Crawford or Canelo could go to Japan and, draw 55,000 people. Canelo might, depending on who he fights. But you understand, people just get unreal. They get unrealistic, and just appreciate the great things about it. He cleaned out his division. Yeah, but he'll lose to this guy at 145 pounds. Of course he will. He's a natural 120 pounder, it's just crazy, man. And if it's like if my aunt had balls, she'd be my uncle.
Exactly.
So just appreciate greatness. Just appreciate greatness, and your life will be better. But there's people, man, they would win the lottery and they would bitch because they'd have to drive over to the office to pick up their check. So it's just appreciate greatness.
Yeah. He's definitely a star over there, man. Like he's a ridiculously big star over there. So, but I think it's just more like for fans to just want to be able to, because they see how great he is on the other side of the world. I think it's just, he's fought over here a couple times, but have you ever seen him fight live, Mike?
No, I haven't. I have not. I've watched a couple of his fights. I think he's a fantastic fighter. He's very accurate with his puncher. He's another very smart fighter. Now you're going to hear people, oh, he got knocked down. He's chinny. I mean, come on, man. It's fight. You're fighting. You're going to get hit. Luis Nary is one of the strongest punchers in the lighter weight divisions. He's one of the strongest punchers. There was a time when Luis Nary, and he still may be, but a lot of guys, is a very feared, powerful guy. If Luis Nary hits you, you may go down. Doesn't mean you're chinny. He got back up. Guys get knocked down. It's part of when elite fighters fight each other. That's what happens. These people that just, I don't think they're happy in their own lives, are never happy with anything.
And then also in that co-main event, Yoshiki Take, I think I pronounced that right, gets the 12-round unanimous decision win over Australia's Jason Maloney for the WBO Bantamweight Championship of the World. And then also this upcoming Sunday, the 12th of May, from Australia on ESPN, Vasily Lomachenko, 17-3, goes up against George Kambosos Jr. for the IBO and vacant IBF lightweight championships of the world. What do you think about Loma now at this stage in his career, Mike?
Well, he had a long amateur career. He's actually had a long pro career now, just not that many fights. So he's just got a lot of experience. I think he's going to outbox Kambosos. Kambosos has shown that he can show up on a big night. I mean, Devin Haney handled him pretty well. Styles always make fights. It'll be something I'd be interested in because I like compelling fights. But I think in the end, Loma beats him. Not sure if he's going to knock him out, but I think Loma does outpoint him.
And then also on the card, Andrew Maloney, the secondary brother, 26-3, goes up against Pedro Guevara, 41-4-1 for the WBC Interim Super Flyweight Championship. Also on that card on ESPN. And then also Saudi Arabia, Turki Al-Sheikh, His Excellency. He's been making a lot of news, making a lot of fights, making a lot of events. After Canelo and Munguia's fight, I think as recently as today, he had said that he plans or he wants to make a Canelo Crawford fight. Do you think that's realistic, or is it all about the money there? And it's like, as long as the price is right, it could happen.
I mean, I jump in a pit full of alligators for what he's paying. You know what I mean? I mean, they say, you want a pit full of alligators or rattlesnakes? I said, the money's right, either or. I mean, money talks. I mean, you guys are talking about guys that have already made a lot of money, having generational wealth and somebody willing to pay for it. I think on most things, there's always a price that people will at least consider it. Canelo's not a super huge guy in the sense that his frame isn't super big. It's not like David Benavidez' frame where David Benavidez can walk around at 210 pounds. Jaime Munguia could do the same and, it would look normal for them. Crawford's a smaller guy, but he's an elite fighter. And it's the size sometimes doesn't always mean the most. So, I mean, that would be a great, I would watch that fight, Terrence Crawford, Canelo Alvarez, but they're definitely making moves and it looks like he's put a lot of good cards together. I know August 3rd, man, I'm looking forward to Virgil Ortiz and Tim Tszyu, and I got a feeling they're gonna add just for the hell of it, just gonna add a couple of more fights on there that people are gonna like.
Are you working fights on that August 3rd card, Mike?
Yeah, I got Virgil Ortiz.
It's just Virgil right now?
For right now, it's just Virgil.
Well, you never know. You might get contracted for something else. There's quite a few fights on
there. Absolutely. So we got a lot of people traveling from a lot of different places. So sometimes the phone rings, but if I only got Virgil, I'm perfectly happy. I love working with Virgil, and and Robert Garcia and Virgil Sr. and, the whole team, and Hector Beltran, the other trainer. So, I'm excited. And when I get to work with top fighters, with top camps in big time events, I'm never going to turn that down.
And then we talked about just before we came on air here, Mike, about, or actually, I think I even said it at the beginning about, at least here on our podcast, we believe that you're, the modern day Stitch Duran, even if you don't like to admit it. Stitch is obviously still in the business. He's still doing his thing. He's a legend in the job that he does and in the sport of boxing. Not even the sport of boxing, MMA as well, combat sports. But if there's anybody there who's like going to take the mantle or keep that generation going, we here on the show, we do believe it's you. Talk about your relationship with somebody like Stitch Duran. So he's frozen. So we'll just talk about it. So we've talked about Mike, and I'm talking to Michael Shepard here. It looks like Mike Rodriguez got frozen a little bit, so he'll probably be jumping on in a second. But what do you think are the commonalities between somebody like Stitch Duran and Mike Rodriguez, Mike Shepard?
I mean, I think something obviously that Mike Rodriguez has going for him is I think both of them actually, the military. Military experience, calm under pressure, the stuff that you kind of taught, by doing that type of role obviously works very well. Obviously you don't have, by the time the boxer sits down, you've probably got 50 seconds to get in there, do your work, and then, get out of there. So I think, both of them have that in their favor. Both of them ex, fighters. So that kind of helps. I think obviously you kind of like understand what's going on. And then I think, where's someone like Michael learning from Stitch? Obviously, you can't go wrong, really, from learning from one of the best fighters. Sorry, the best cutmen in the game. So it's a very unique role. There's not many, people who do that. So,
I mean, that's also the thing too, is that we don't know. There could be other cutmen, and I'm sure there's other cutmen out there who just aren't as visible to the boxing fans and the boxing media. As Mike Rodriguez is, he does interviews, he talks to a lot of press, a lot of fans and stuff like that. So he's a lot more, his visibility is a lot higher. Obviously there's a lot more, there's cutmen out there who are very consistent in the game. Like he talked about his son who keeps a low profile. But we know about him because, we've seen him at fights, and then his dad, Mike, talks about him as well.
I'm back, fellas. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we were just we were continuing that topic on you and Stitch Duran, but you said you got some stories, right?
Yeah, we worked against Stitch. He was a cut man for Gilbert Maestri, and he's been around forever. And like I said, he's a legend, an icon, and he's somebody that I definitely look up to and respect. But I don't even call him Stitch, and we always joke about that. I ran into him and his daughter at some fights when I worked with Sean McCallum against Diego Pacheco. A few weeks back in Vegas, and she goes, "You don't call my dad Stitch?" And I'm like, "No, I call him Jacob because I've known him since I was 19. He was one of my boxing coaches in the Air Force when he was just Jacob Duran, back in 1986. Sometimes I'll call him Stitch, but it's a little weird for me because I just usually call him Jacob. And, and it's something that, I've known him for now, 30, I'm going to do the math, but I mean, I've known him now for 38 years. So, and I'm going to be 58. So, I mean, and I think he's in his early to mid 70s. We have a good relationship, and, just to be considered and to be able to be mentioned in the same breath, guys like him and Carlos Vargas and Miguel Diaz, the late Joe Chavez. And, and I look at guys like on the East Coast, like Danny Milano and Rudy Hernandez, who you see in boxing and the UFC, and some of my contemporaries, like Mike Basil and Aaron Navarro and Russ Anber up in Canada, who works with a lot of fighters. And then you got guys, like my son, and you got other guys, they're working their way up, and they're building their stables, and they're building their resumes. And, I want to be known for a guy. Nobody's ever going to remember how much money you made. They're going to ask you one thing: how many world champions have you worked with? And I've worked with 25 world champions, and I'm very, very proud of that. And that's what I want people to remember when they remember that my work was consistent, that I always gave my best effort, and I always did the craft of a cut man. I did it, I did it justice. I did it justice because I was a former fighter. I didn't start off as a Cutman. I started off by training guys, but because of my regular job as a homicide detective, I couldn't be in the gym with guys. So I figured out a way that I could still do something to be in the sport and make my mark in the sport that I wasn't able to do as a fighter. And I've had a lot of help along the way by guys like, Stitch Duran, the late Joe Chavez, Carlos Vargas, David Martinez from the La Habra Boys Club was the very first guy I ever talked about doing cuts. And he had worked with like Shane Mosley, and he'd worked with Miguel Cotto. So I'm very gracious and I'm very appreciative of that, and being able to pass that on to now my son and the next generation of people. I will always do whatever I can to help somebody that's doing things the right way.
Ending on this note, Mike, as many fights and events that you worked, whether it was big, small, regional, national, global, and as many as you continue to work in the future, I'm sure there's always at least one memory of each fight that you've ever done. Like, oh, I'm always going to remember this. I'm always going to remember that.
Yeah.
What's that one memory from this past weekend in Las Vegas?
The fact that we went in as a team with Jaime Munguia, we had prepared, and we came out as a team, and that we were very proud of him on the very biggest stage. And the fact that even though we lost, I still felt like, not that we won the fight, but I still felt like we won. And we went in there together as a team, and we came out, and I think we're even stronger and better for it.
Awesome. Yeah. Can't get any better than that, especially as a team. So, Mike, we obviously appreciate it. Before we let you go here, go ahead and let everybody know where they can find you and keep up with any type of information that you put out there. And also, all the fights you coming up with your fighters. We talked about Katie Taylor. She's got a big fight coming up in the next couple of months, a big rematch with Amanda Serrano on Netflix. So that's I'm sure that's a big deal, not just to her, but to you as well, being on the inaugural Netflix show for a boxing fight. So that's a pretty big deal, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at BoxerRods, BoxerRodz. Z as in zebra. I love to chop it off with good, intelligent fight people. And I try to not listen to the noise for the people that just want to be heard that have no factual information.
We get it.
I always remember this, because as a homicide detective, there's two things I always tell people. The devil's in the details, and evidence don't lie. People do.
That's great. Yeah. Can you help us get Gil Carrillo on? Is he a boxing fan? Maybe on a big fan?
Yeah, Gil's a huge fan, and I probably could, because Gil has actually had me as a guest on the George Lopez podcast.
I saw that. Yeah, I saw you were on there.
So let me reach out to Gil tomorrow, and I'll see if he's willing to come on. I'm sure he would.
Yeah. We'll talk about old school fights and Chavez, De La Hoya. Keep it pretty light,
yeah.
But.
And for our boxing events on the sheriff's department, Gil used to be the announcer.
Yeah, I heard. Yeah, I saw him saying that. So that's why it'd be cool to kind of talk to him, because of his not only his kind of connection to boxing like that, but also the history that he made as a detective for the sheriff's department here in Los Angeles. Back in the '80s. So that's a pretty big deal too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll work on that and get back to you. But it was great chatting it up with you guys, man. I really appreciate it. I love your show, and I can't wait to send the link out to everybody.
You got it, man. You got it. And Mike, as we finish up, Mike, go ahead and let them know where they can find us and follow us so we can finish up.
At The Last Round 12 on Instagram and Twitter. And be sure to join us next week for the undisputed heavyweight title of the world will be on the line between Alexander Usyk and Tyson Fury.
Absolutely. So for our guest of the week in professional Cutman, crime fighting detective, Mike Rodriguez, for my co-host Michael Shepard, I'm Danny Z. This is The Last Round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Last Round